Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Scarlett and I'm an atheist and skeptic in progress. I like to contemplate matters of life and philosophy, especially what gives us meaning and purpose. Today I'm revisiting Carm's Matt Slick and his Questions for Atheists. This is maybe the most obnoxious list of questions for atheists, and that is the point of this video, to show everything I find tedious and obnoxious about this list. For starters, there are 67 questions. 60 fucking 7 with sub-questions. It goes without saying I won't be answering them all. Away we go. A refresher. Matt Slick is a presuppositionalist Christian, or presup as I will say. He presupposes God's existence and the truth of the Bible, and goes on from there. He has this site called Christian Apologetics and Research Ministry. He has a radio show, he does books, debates, all of that. On this particular page with the questions, he lists all of his beliefs about Christianity with some Bible citations. And someone with a stronger constitution might want to dig through all of that for contradictions. All I can say is, dude knows what he believes, and good on him for laying it out, I guess. I also note that this list of questions is a debate requirement. But Slick is clear that even if you do complete this massive task, it doesn't commit him to a debate. I think Sisyphus has a better task than a person who undertakes this list in the hopes of debating Slick. What it says to me is you really got to want to debate Matt Slick. It's also possible for Slick to say, oh look, none of these atheists want to debate me and my big brain. I'm not saying he does that, but sometimes people do lay out things in such a way that others don't want to interact with them, and then they pretend that the other people are at fault. But 67 plus questions without the promise of a debate? Yikes. So 67 questions with sub-questions is already obnoxious, but I want to point to the fact that the questions being a prerequisite to a debate tells me that Slick is not interested in a dialogue with an atheist. The point of the questions is not to understand atheists better. The point is to get all the atheists' presuppositions to prepare for how to attack them. Basically, I don't see Slick as an honest seeker of truth. What he wants to do is proselytize, sell his brand of Christianity. I already suspect that most of these questions for atheists we see all over YouTube are like this, a way to sell some flavor of a religion, usually Christianity in this place. But framed this way, it's obvious that is what's going on. A side note, I hope I'm quoting all of these questions properly. There's this whole part about how to quote them, but I think that's more about search engines, searching web pages. It's not really aimed at YouTube videos. I'm going to be screenshotting all of these, and I hope that that meets the requirement for talking about these questions. I've already talked about the number of questions as obnoxious. Here's the next thing I find obnoxious. The number of times it says, do you affirm or deny? Or sometimes just, do you affirm? My search feature says that do you affirm or deny occurs 35 times, and affirm on its own another 4 times. Yeesh. I guess this seems all philosophical or whatever, but it comes off as aggressive, especially in its repetition. I have the impression of a trial lawyer badgering a witness on the stand, as if Slick imagines himself in a court of law with the atheist on trial for existing with different beliefs. Here's a slight tangent, since these questions are prerequisite for a debate. I'm not a big fan of debates as a way to settle questions. I have watched a few. Sometimes you can learn something, but debates are first and foremost a performance. The information can flow over you with little time for thinking on the part of an observer and no time for fact-checking. A good orator can be convincing on the slimmest of information. So all this debate me bro kind of posturing in social media spaces isn't all that impressive to me. And anyway, haven't we all had that fantasy of putting people who have hurt us on trial and having the judge and a horrified jury take our side? Just me? Anywho, this do you affirm or deny style of questioning smacks of debate as trial. And I do feel the debate me bro style is just that, imagining the debate as some kind of verdict of truth, when it's a performance of who is convincing. I much prefer lectures and videos with source material cited so I can stop and think. I try not to put my whole belief into the information, but I do like to hear from measured experts who spend their lives studying a topic. Alright, digression over. Let's take a look at these questions. Because there's so many, they come with headings. The first one is atheism. Good. That's what we're here for, talking about atheism. Morality. Boo. This subset needs to go away forever. Nature. Not sure why this is a listing. Science. Again, nothing to do with atheism, but if God is the originator of everything, we always have to come to this. Logic. Here's Slick's hobby horse. The laws of logic. Humanity, at this point, like, whatever. Evolution, why isn't this with science? I mean, there are only 2 questions on evolution, but why the science headings were more about general science. Next up, we have Christianity. How about other religions? I guess at least this is sort of on topic. And then finally, philosophy. Again, why is this here? Couldn't this have been lumped with religion, not just Christianity? And I am tired already, and I haven't even looked into any of the questions. Just looking up the headings has me a little exhausted. So let's just even go with that. The headings are also a little obnoxious as far as I'm concerned. But these headings are not without purpose. They are meant, I think, to communicate the seriousness of the endeavor. Slick gave us his definition of God, which is lengthy. And the 67 questions seem to imply we as atheists should be able to do as much, affirm or deny all these topics before our atheism is valid. But no, you don't have to justify your beliefs, and you can believe for dumb reasons. And by the way, you can also always say, I don't know. But anyway, as I said, I'm not going to be looking at all of the questions. I'm going to be picking out specific things and commenting on what the implication is and why I don't feel that these questions are really genuine and authentic and in search of a real dialogue. All right, let's look at some questions. So the first questions under atheism all strike me as fine, gentle leading into the 67 questions, asking you to define atheism, gauging the strength of it, asking about agnosticism, and I do like that there is a distinction between belief and knowledge. But then 4 through 6. Why do you believe your atheism is a justifiable position to hold? I mean, I guess it's okay. I mean, it's just non-belief. Number 5, do you have proof of the non-existence of the Christian Trinitarian God? And number 6, LOL, if you have proof of the non-existence of Christian Trinitarian God, can you please explain it? Sure, yeah, let me explain that to you. I mean, proving a negative is already treading into philosophically shaky ground. But here's the thing. We should live our lives by believing things for which there is evidence, not starting with belief in things until we can prove them wrong. God just seems to be one of those categories that has a special place carved out. A special get out of disbelief card in a religious board game. We allow this because of tradition. Basically, though, Christians claim that there's this being who wants me to believe in him. Some think he wants a relationship with me. Some say the Holy Spirit has convicted them in their hearts that he exists. By the way, does anyone else puzzle over the term convict as if Christians are all going to jail? Anyway, why do I have to rely on apologetics and smug preachers for my belief? If God can provide them evidence they can accept, she should be able to do that for all of us, not send us all these terrible envoys with their contradictory messages. But basically, these questions for atheism are just trying to get atheists to accept the burden of proof, to justify their position, to say that they have to prove something to Slick. And as I said, you don't have to prove anything to anybody. Returning to the questions on atheism, number 7, the last one. If it could be shown that your atheism refutes itself, would you abandon it? I suppose Slick is thinking about his argument, TAG, the transcendental argument for God, which says Christianity accounts for the laws of logic and atheism doesn't. But that isn't atheism refuting itself. How can disbelief refute itself? I simply don't accept your claims. How does me not accepting your claims refute itself? Show me some evidence for God. That's all I'm saying. But to wrap up this talk about these questions on atheism, I think from the easygoing, how do you define your atheism, setting you up very slowly into this, and now you have to justify it. You have a burden of proof. And by the way, Slick has refutations, so it's already making you doubt yourself before you even get off into other questions. And I think that that's the purpose of all of these. All right, let's move on to some other questions. The morality ones have a lot of do you affirm or deny style questions, and it's all just exhausting. But let's look at the first one under morality, number 8. Is the following statement true or false? It is always wrong for anyone to torture babies to death merely for one's own personal pleasure. Whoa. And then number 9, is the preceding statement neither true nor false? Just look at that wording. Torture babies to death for one's own personal pleasure. Every part of that is stunningly horrifying, or horrifyingly stunning, whichever way. I would argue intentionally torturing any being that is aware is wrong. Animals, babies, people, for one's own personal pleasure or not. And by torture, I mean inflicting severe pain or suffering, especially to coerce them for some reason, not accidentally doing it. I do eat meat, which means killing animals, but I want them butchered with as little pain as possible, not tortured. Then number 9, is the preceding statement neither true nor false? I've seen and heard variations on question 8, and it always seems to be setting up the notion that we have a built-in sense of morality. And they always have some extreme position involving babies and harming them for our own pleasure. But I struggle to think of how a regular person would take pleasure in even accidentally harming babies. I think you would have to be a sociopath. This doesn't take into account that some societies thought infanticide was acceptable or sacrificing babies. They didn't do it for some personal pleasure, though. They did it out of a sense of duty to their community or to a deity. Anyway, with 8 and 9 together, it's all meant to sound very philosophical. But this is not going to lead toward a philosophical discussion. All of this, do you affirm or deny, implies that your thoughts are settled, whereas philosophy, as it's been practiced, is about discussions that don't land on sound footing. Basically, in the absence of an apologetic project, these questions would be very interesting, but they don't invite a real exchange with the opportunity for individual growth. And let's not forget, for Slick, God created everything and does what he pleases. A sort of might makes right, if you will, but pretending that God will use his might for good. So, yeah, Slick does not appear engaged in a true philosophical project. This is an apologetic one. I'm going to skip most of the moral questions. Most of them could have been summed up in one question, and it's a little tedious. The purpose seems to be to show us how complicated morality is, and maybe put an atheist on the defensive. But let's remember, moral questions don't have anything to do with atheism. However, I do want to look at number 17 and its sub-question number 1. Do you affirm or deny that ethical values are hierarchical? Number 1, an example of hierarchical values would be the affirmation that stealing a paperclip from work is not as bad as murdering people. So here we are at the extremes again. Like, yeah, stealing a paperclip from work. Technically it's wrong, but what a nothing burger. I mean, who really gets hurt by me taking home a paperclip or even, gasp, making a personal photocopy on a work machine? A company losing what amounts to a few cents is nothing. I don't even think there's harm done, even if every employee does this. I mean, it's just money. Companies probably lose more paper clips or waste more paper or just throw stuff away than they would lose on people taking a paperclip home. But killing someone that's demonstrably harmful, you've taken a life. They can no longer live. It's just really obvious. But I wouldn't even put taking a few small items from work on the same level as embezzlement. Where it would get interesting to me is at what point taking items from work becomes something more, becomes a real harmful act. But this question doesn't want to engage an issue like that. It really wants to cut up the world in these very simple dichotomies. That's all I'm really going to say about these moral questions, but I would like to wrap up the section by saying what is being suggested by Slick here is Christianity offers answers to all of these. It's a very simple answer, and the answer is God. And therefore, atheism has to offer answers for these. Therefore, these questions are to put atheists on the defensive, to make us think that we need to do something that we don't have to do. We can have discussions about these things and decide them as we go along. And we can also say, I don't know. Why don't we have a discussion about harm and then decide what is morally appropriate? There you go. Moving on, I'm going to skip several of the categories. I'm interested really in looking at the questions for Christianity and why I find them obnoxious and tedious. So the Christianity questions start at 48, and I find them to be very aggressive. The first one asks about why you reject Christianity, not why don't you believe, which is a little more neutral. Number 49, what caused you to deny his existence, not why did you stop believing. Number 50, do you believe the world would be better off without Christianity? 51, is the behavior of the God of the Old Testament morally wrong? And only 52, really, what would be sufficient evidence for you to believe in God's existence, is really an okay question and worded well. It's fine. So these questions already come with this loaded notion that you've rejected something, you've denied something, as opposed to maybe simply you stopped believing, that it was more gentle than that. And denying and rejecting makes it feel like the thing is there to be rejected and to be denied. So I find that a little tedious and a little leading, and putting people on a defensive for something that they shouldn't be on the defensive for. Next up, there's a whole series of questions that make sure that you have read the things that Matt Slick believes, like number 53, where he repeats the whole section from above about what he believes, but this time minus all the Bible verses. Number 54 is similar. There's another, you acknowledge having read a statement. This is all just very legalistic. So 53 and 54, we're back in this legal realm, as if this isn't a dialogue, it isn't a discussion about what's really true. Then 56, you've already asked this, can you disprove the Christian God? This is a repetition, it could have been totally avoided. Ditto 57, and then 58 is reason sufficient to examine the truth claims of Christianity. I think this is a good point to remind ourselves that Matt Slick is a presuppositionalist. He did not come to his faith through reason and rational thought or proof or evidence or anything. He simply presupposes all of this. So this little exercise is meaningless. Matt is just going to tell you, oh, I just presuppose all of this, and so should you, and you should be afraid of hell. But I just want to return to what is the purpose of these questions. The purpose of these questions on Christianity specifically is to put the atheist on the defensive, to make you think that there is a better case for Christianity than there is, and to make it look like you have to do all of these somersaults and backflips in order to prove it wrong when you don't. It's up to the Christians to make the case and provide evidence, and not just presuppose. I'm sure somebody's going to come along and tell me, well, you know, if Matt Slick wants a debate, he can have any conditions, any preconditions for that debate. And of course he can. He can debate anybody or not debate anybody. He can have all of the conditions he wants. That doesn't mean I have to pat him on the back and say, woo, those are some great conditions. The sheer number of questions, the legalistic language of do you affirm or deny, the aggressiveness of some of the questions on Christianity, the redundancy that's built in, all of these to me make this a very tedious and obnoxious list of questions. Well, let me know what you think in the comments. What do you think of these questions? I'll leave a link so you can go look at all of them and think about them. And all I can say is if you want to debate Matt Slick and you want to answer all those questions, good luck. As always, I've been Scarlett, giving my life meaning and purpose by making this video. If you liked it, you can, YouTube like it and all that kind of stuff. See you in the next one. Bye for now.